I'm welcoming the members to our monthly members meeting, and it's a great pleasure to see you. As you know, we're sort of off the success of getting the city council to vacate its order for condemnation of the land along the coast that we own and Nordic wanted. But I just want to say that as Yogi Berra said, it ain't over till it's over. Or as they say in Philadelphia 76ers land, it's not over till the fat lady sings. Um, Nordic and the city are still up to things, and we still need the attention of all the members as we continue to proceed on multiple fronts to really rid ourselves of Nordic and to secure the environment and the ecology of the Mid-Coast area. That being said, I'm very excited that Nickie Sekera is going to be our speaker tonight, and I'm going to now forthwith turn over to Ellie, aka Andrew Stevenson, to make the introduction.
Okay, thanks, Sid. So I was chatting with Nickie last night, and we were trying to remember how long ago, how we met each other. And we think it was at a water conference at the University of Maine, perhaps. I think we crossed paths before that, but that was when we really began talking with one another. And so I've known Nickie quite well for more than 6 years, really since the beginning of the Nordic fight, and since going up and showing one of my presentations at the water conference at University of Maine. And since then, I've put a proposal in every year and never been accepted back in. So I guess I got to do that once undercover. But Nickie lives in Freiburg, and she has been involved with water issues since the days that Poland Spring first came and invaded over in the western part of the state. So Nickie is a true water warrior, a longtime activist, and most recently she was appointed by the Speaker of the House to the commission to study the role of water as a resource in the state of Maine. And that work informed some legislative efforts and no doubt brought a lot more focus onto issues of water extraction and water co-option and water being privatized in the state of Maine. She also is a journalist and a researcher with Sunlight Media, which follows the many multifaceted goings-on in the Wabanaki community in the state. And she is the mom of a young friend of mine, Luke, who is now about to celebrate his 21st birthday and is a second generation, if not greater than that, activist, environmental activist, very articulate guy, and someone that I have really loved meeting. So I'm really thrilled to have you with us tonight, Nickie. And Nickie's got some things to share with us for 10 or 15 minutes. I encourage everybody to please mute yourselves so that Nickie does not have to go through a lot of background noise. And after she talks with us, we'll have a chance to have some good question and answers with her. Okay. Take it away.
All right, let's see if I can get this working straight here. All right, can you see?
You can slide your sidebar with all the little spaces on it up to the top if that's better for you.
Let's see here. I'm trying to get wait a second. Oh yeah, this bar is like Sorry. I'm not using my computer either, so it's
Okay.
how do I get this to full screen here?
Is there a little box up in the upper right corner?
I see captions, full screen. Okay. Sorry about this.
That's okay.
Shouldn't I just be able to? Oh, there we go. I don't know.
Oh,
Is that better for you?
no, it's off of my screen. How about anybody
Is it?
else? Yeah.
Okay, wait. Let me get back to how.
I've only seen half of it.
Okay. All right. Let me just get that back in there.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
that's it.
Is that how does
Yep.
that look on your end?
That's good.
We get the whole thing. Yeah.
That looks better.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. Apologies there. So as Ellie was saying that my son and I co-founded Community Water Justice in 2012 as a response to Poland Spring trying to secure a 45-year contract within our community. And so what we do since that time, we offer support to other frontline communities fighting water injustices that just need support. We're entering a new age of water resource grabbing from multinational corporations, and we have very powerful people looking to secure access for their future profits above community needs. So, we have to, sometimes it's hard to see and get the global picture from our rural communities. And we really need to ask ourselves is, do we want our local water sources controlled by corporations or protected by our own communities? Going back, as I mentioned, in Freiburg, when the Poland Spring Company was going to secure a long-term contract, they had to work with our local water company. And I believe like in Belfast, you also have a local municipal water system with a board of water district trustees. And so these are the local water systems that deliver our water to us. And so because that our municipal water system was owned by a private company, it really limited input and say from our local community because we did not agree to this arrangement. We brought it up all the way to the Supreme Court, but ultimately our community did not have a say because this arrangement was between two private companies. And it limited our democratic process around the decision-making of our water allocations from our community. Let me just let's see. And the biggest concern we had with that is we have a really antiquated set of laws on our books that people call absolute dominion or absolute capture. And what this means is if you own the property of the land, the land where the points where you're accessing water, specifically groundwater, means surface waters have protection under a public trust. But when the state was moving towards putting surface waters under a public trust, it purposely kept groundwater out of that equation. And so because of that, we have a law on our books still that has not been updated since the mid to late 1800s. And we're one of very few states that still has this absolute dominion law in our books. And it effectively means that, as you can see in this picture, there's consequences to that because large water extractors have a legal standing that ultimately protects them from impacting others' ability to potentially use the water underneath, under the ground. And in 1999, there was a legal case, Maddox versus Giles, that the the Supreme Court ruled that, due to one landowner dewatering an adjacent landowners, the ones that overpumped were not held liable. And so the judges punted the responsibility back to the legislature at that time. And the reason why that absolute dominion was upheld was because of the inaction of the legislature to change those laws. And, as you can imagine, with a large multinational corporation as Poland Spring, who recently was bought out by a pair of private equity firms back in, during the pandemic. So now it's not Nestle Waters that owns the 10 locations where they take water from currently in the state of Maine. It's a combination of two private equity firms, and the two private equity firms were Metropolis and Company and One Rock Capital. So this was a $4.3 billion deal where Nestle sold all of their bottled water brands in North America, except for the, they may have held on to the Pure Life brand. I'd have to go back and look that up, but the majority of all of the brands. So it was the largest wholesale of, capturing our water that we know of in history to this point. So, One Rock Capital and Metropolis and Company say that their priority is to make the water brands more profitable by cutting corners. And we know that means that Maine residents and our natural environment will ultimately be getting an even shorter end of the stick in this equation, and poor and marginalized communities even shorter. Now, when Nestle says that they were good water stewards, we know that's not true, because no good steward would sell off the water commons, especially to predatory investors, to more deeply entrench the privatization of our most valuable life resource. And for the first time in human history, water futures were traded on Wall Street on December 7th, 2020. So it kind of allows us to see the pathway that water control is going with Wall Street, and why these companies like One Rock Capital and Metropolis, who then formed the company called Blue Triton. And so currently Poland Springs' parent company is doing business as Blue Triton. And, the purpose of water trading is to allow water through market forces to move to more profitable uses. And so we need to really think about that when we are sharing our water resources with multinational corporations whose motivation is to continually increase their profits. It's not a really healthy equation for rural communities who depend upon it for their daily needs and livelihoods. Now, let's see if there's another. All right. So I don't know if some of you heard during this last legislative session, there was a bill, LD 1111, that was a super important bill that the New York Times picked up, and I spoke a lot to during its course in the legislature. And essentially what the bill does is it would limit the length of years that companies could secure for water exports. Particularly, yes, it was addressing the problem with the bottled water industries, but our feelings are that no corporation that is going to take local water sources and ship them out in significant bulk water fashion should get to secure contracts that last generations long, because now that we are in the middle of changes in our climate that we're still getting to understand what that means, we're making arrangements that our children and their kids have had no input, and our water changes and uses well, our water needs and uses change over time, particularly when we see growth in our population or prolonged periods of drought. So how can we know that our communities aren't going to come first in these equations if we've locked up a significant amount of our resources for export? So, and we have to also think because of our recent constitutional amendments to our right to food, we have to ensure that our local farmers and growers will not be in competition with private equity for our basic needs and the waters that we need to even be able to provide our own food. The other good things about this bill was, private equity firms have taken control of approximately 96% of bottled water exports from Maine, which is well over 1 billion gallons per year and growing. And water districts and our water utilities do not uniformly provide a democratic process in communities' decisions about bulk water exports that I just mentioned in the case of Freiburg, and also up in Lincoln this past summer. The Lincoln Water District in Poland Spring went through this whole arrangement without having a hearing on it. And I was with the community when they showed up to the water district's final meeting before the docket was closed to even enter comments. And the water district even refused to entertain any questions at all. So it's really playing out in harmful ways when the local community doesn't even have adequate input and say in these water deals. So we have a compromised regulatory process around this. Poland Spring, when we have many different state agencies that interact with them that are supposed to be regulating and overseeing the protection of our water sources. And that includes the, Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And they take the lead also and recommendations from the Maine Board of Environmental Protection. In recent years, they have had a paid Poland Spring employee who is their natural resources manager sit on that board. Currently, he doesn't, but for a number of years, and the amount of influence that they do still hold in our state house is significant. They also interact with the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, which is tied to the Land Use Regulation Commission and the Land Use Planning Commission. There's the Maine Department of Health and Human Services, also tied to the CDC, and they take direction from Maine Drinking Water Program. Thomas Brennan was on that board, the Maine Drinking Water Program, for many, many years, and actually oversaw and was the bridge person between their operations in Maine and quote unquote compliance. And he's been cited many times in a current lawsuit that's claiming fraud on their part. Thomas Brennan quietly left Poland Spring, and he's now working for American Aqua Farms. Maine Public Utilities Commission, that's the entity that we interacted with in Freiburg, and if Poland Spring is doing any deals with a municipal water supply, they have to go and get everything approved to the Public Water Utilities Commission. And they're interesting because municipal water districts are under them. And so you have, the MPUC is a quasi-judiciary agency, and municipal water districts, they are a quasi-municipality. So they kind of have their own separate powers that are separate from the municipal powers. And a significant thing to note is that they have the power of eminent domain to go further afield and secure more water resources to serve their customers. And sometimes that can mean crossing town boundaries and whatnot to secure for their customers. And I think that's largely the reason why the most two recent towns that Poland Spring has sought to do business with are water districts. because the water districts have the power of eminent domain, so that way this, Poland Spring doesn't have to go further afield continually to take care of their business needs, and they're kind of protected under utilities for their business model. They also don't have to follow the same regulations for significant groundwater wells under NERPA if they're part of a utility. So this is also another way to shield their business model. And then we have privatized water systems. So when you have a corporation like Poland Spring, who is seeking to export groundwater, it's pretty clear that doing business with privatized systems is likely a little bit easier, because you can get around community conflict a little bit better. And and it's an arrangement where privatized water systems would seek out the revenue from that to return increased profits to their shareholders. So when you have privatized water systems making arrangements for export, that just raises a lot of concerns about local control and how we want to fashion ourselves in our communities for future needs. And so, Maine Water Company, for example, they own and operate water systems in 21 towns and cities in Maine, and manage water systems in an additional 5 towns. And let's see, and most notably, and I'm trying to think of, let's see, was it around 2020, they merged with San Jose Water Company. So now Maine Water, who's actually Connecticut Water, they were under Connecticut Water's umbrella. They're now San Jose Water, and they're based in California and operate water systems in 5 different states. So, where do California and Maine meet on this water trajectory? Well, here's one way, is through Maine Water Company. And this is a map that shows, in the blue, you can see where Poland Spring has their operations currently. And in the orange and also in the striped areas are where Maine Water Company operates, or are working out some sort of deal with hopes to take over the water system entirely. And I think in future years, we can expect that to grow, which is kind of scary, because we do have, at the national level, in total, our drinking water and wastewater systems require at least $744 billion in investment over the next 20 years, because we have a failure on the part of our federal government to allocate enough funding to have maintained all of our public water systems in the United States. And now we're looking at a huge gap to fill. And so, public wastewater systems alone, as of the latest needs survey that was done back in 2012, it needed at least an estimated $271 billion over the next 2 decades to improve treatment plant sewer lines, address stormwater, and stop overflows. But the EPA, Clean Water State Revolving Fund Program, which is the main source of federal support for wastewater projects, provided a mere $1.6 billion in 2021, and the infrastructure law of 2021 added only $12.7 billion over 5 years to this program. And so this falls far short of the needs. And overall, federal funding on water and wastewater infrastructure has plummeted since its peak in the 1970s, dropping 77% in 77% from 1977 to 2017 in real terms. And that's per capita decrease in funding of 84%. So when our municipal water systems have to make up these differences for infrastructure upgrades, and we found a friend and I worked on, I encouraged him to help try to figure out we've looked at a host of water districts in Maine, and it seems clear that our water districts are not putting away enough from their current rates to maintain these infrastructure upgrades. Now, the Biden administration, they have a committee, which is the National Infrastructure Advisory Council. It was created in 2001 after September 11th to advise the White House through the Department of Homeland Security and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency on how to reduce physical and cyber risks and to improve the security and resilience of the nation's critical infrastructure sectors. That's a mouthful. And that was found on the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency website. So the recent recommendations from this National Infrastructure Advisory Council, the recommendation was made to privatize our public water systems as a way to take care of this huge gap we have that we need to be spending from our federal government. And they're looking to, be the do-gooders and help the federal government out, take care of this by buying up water systems or investing in them so they can turn it over to a for-profit model, which of course Wall Street is very excited because they see this as untapped billions or trillions that they can make off of our local water sources. And so this advisory council is made up of all kinds of people with conflicts of interest, as you can see. And yeah, so, where we're headed with this is kind of scary. And, I spent time this past several months trying to block amendments going onto bills that would divert federal funding to privatized water systems. And it's really important right now to pay attention at all levels to make sure that our tax dollars are going towards our public municipal supplies and not privatized ones that are turning a profit for their shareholders. Let's see, I don't want to go on too much longer because I want to leave plenty of time for questions because I could talk your ears off all night. And I will say that, in Denmark, Maine, right now, actually Thursday night, we have the accumulation of 2 years of work in the town of Denmark. They've been working hard trying to change their ordinance with Poland Spring. They made a deal with them, and the task is proving almost impossible to get the ordinance changed so they feel like it's protecting their surface waters. We have Long Pond there that was slowly been disappearing over a few year period because of prolonged drought. And, we'll see how Thursday goes because I know that the ordinance came back to the committee with edits from Poland Spring in it. So again, this is a significant imbalance of power. The community can't afford to hire their lawyer and their hydrologist to attend every meetings, but Poland Spring and their whole team is there for every meeting. And so they're the experts in the room. And, unfortunately, some of the committee members divert to their expertise. And it's really frustrating for those of us that care about these things to watch all of how this all unfolds. And yeah, so let's see. I know Ellie and I spoke about leaving plenty of time for questions. So maybe right there might be a good time and just starting a conversation and that with questions.
That's great. Thank you, Nickie. If you take your slides down,
Okay.
then we'll be able to see people raising their hands, and you can either raise it physically or you can raise it from your toolbar under, I think it's reactions, allows you to raise your hand. So are there any questions for Nickie? Yeah, Doug.
Oops. I
You're
can't hear you.
muted, Doug. Yeah. You're still muted, Doug.
Okay, now I'm off.
There you
Oh, there.
So
Yeah.
what I didn't see mentioned was DERM. So that is the Department of Environmental Regulation and Management. And I didn't see that on any of that. And they're a bitch to deal with. And they have very strong guidelines for protection of water. They're federal, but I thought each state has their own DERM. So like I'm in Florida. So we have DERM for the state of Florida, and there's all kinds of guidelines and protections for sewage, water runoff, and I think there are some federal guidelines there too. And I'm surprised that I didn't see any mention of DERM, because DEP is the police arm for DERM. Their Department of Environmental Protection, they're the ones that actually come out and enforce the DERM regulations.
Yeah, I personally, haven't had any interactions with them. It's with the DEP themselves.
Yeah, they're the
I don't hear
police.
them showing up at hearings. I've never witnessed their presence. You know, those meetings, if our DEP in fact engages with them, I just haven't seen their presence to date. I'm not saying that they don't exist. It's just to date, there's been no interaction that I'm aware of.
Okay, you should look. I think
Yeah.
you would look. I think you should look into that. It might be helpful for you.
Sure. Yeah, I'll look into DERM. I mean, I've heard of them, but as far as I haven't had any interactions yet.
Okay.
Yep, I'm writing it down.
All right. Good. I
Yeah.
just had run in with them. That's why. So.
Right. We'll find out where they exist in Maine once
Okay.
I run into them.
All right.
Corinne, I see Corinne's hand.
So has there been any effort in the legislature to change this absolute dominion or to change the water district control so that they stop being quasi-public, which means they don't have any response? I mean, quasi-public. Our water district doesn't, we can't interact with them. We can't, we don't vote for the board. I mean, there's nothing public about it. So I don't understand. So the real question is, has there been any legislation that has gone to those levels?
Well, it's funny to ask because LD 1111 that I mentioned,
Yeah.
limiting the years, the original language of that bill included, so if you were going to export bulk water out of a town, you had to have, like, there was a consult process between adjoining communities within a watershed, because, you know, our municipal water districts are really, it's a very colonial construct that really isn't reflective of our watersheds. And so that provision was meant to more respectfully honor a watershed model. And so if the watershed in general could be impacted by bulk water exports as was being proposed, and because we still don't know what sort of impacts that might have for the long term. This is a relatively new activity. If we look at the human trajectory and shipping out water sources all over the world, you know, in this new emerging commodity, which water should never be a commodity. And this is why, because, I mean, we do have examples of out west, the impact of the groundwater and its depletion. That New York Times article that I put up, they did a whole series on how our nation is depleting our groundwater supply 40% faster than what they could have ever imagined. You know, and it's particularly alarming in the West because their groundwater stores aren't able to be replenished as quickly as some other places. And so it's interesting because Maine has this idea that we are resilient to all of these problems because we have a lot of water. But like that photo I showed you on Long Pond, and the whole end of that pond was disappearing, and that's where all the frogs, and that's the nursery of that pond in that place, and what type of overall environmental impacts over withdrawal can have. And so when we look at these systems and how we interact with it, there was another bill in 2017 I'll also mention, used to kind of democratize the decision-making process. There was a bill I was recommending that all water district trustees in the state go through an election process. So there's direct accountability to the people of the district and not appointed. So again, if something were to come up and people are making bad decisions and engaging with entities that might be against our best interest as a community for long-term planning, then you can put somebody in that's going to represent your interests. And of course, that bill failed, but it doesn't mean it can't come around again. And honestly, I would even take that further. Again, this is part of our learning trajectory, and the more people that get educated on this, it's more likely we'll be able to do something about it, is having people on water districts representation that live outside of the district, because water district boundaries, just like town boundaries, are rather arbitrary to some degree. They defy the laws of nature, right? And so, it's for people that are on a shared source, but don't get voting rights within the district boundaries, because if you're going to elect a water district trustee, if you don't live within the service area of the district, you don't get a vote, even if you might be on the same shared resource. So that's another way that control of water is taken through this construct. So you have representatives, other representatives sitting on that to better democratize it. It's not going to cure the problem at all, but it will at least be honoring natural law and giving voice to those other users.
Good, I saw your hand.
Yes, I was interested in the map of Maine that you showed, which indicated the areas which were controlled by Poland Springs or Nestle or whatever they're called now. And if I read that correctly, it looked like the western side of Penobscot Bay, which would include Belfast, was part of the Maine Water Company. But so I'm curious whether the Belfast Water District is owned by them, or is I wasn't aware of anything like that.
Yeah, no, Belfast is not on that list. I can read you quickly the towns that they are in. If that's
So if Belfast is not on that list, that
no, there's like Rockland area, Rockport, Camden area. Yeah, I mean inland. Yep.
Thank you.
But
Corinne.
Was the northern part of the state all in the dash? I couldn't really tell in the map.
No.
Okay.
The
Okay,
further
thank you.
north, so Maine Water, their furthest north point is Millinocket, which is interesting because, as you know, Eric Heim left Nordic Aqua Farms and it's now in Millinocket setting up his new outfit, right?
Yep.
And Maine Water Company operates there as well. So maybe for Eric, it was a lesson learned in Belfast, and let's go where there's a privatized water company, and I'm really curious how that's shaking out up there with that type of relationship, if they're going to be setting up their own water systems. But I did see somewhere their names together, and that's a rabbit hole that I have set aside in the moment, and I'm very curious about. So and then the furthest north of Poland Spring is Lincoln. So yeah. Kim Tucker.
Hey, I had a question. If speaking of Eric Heim and all the rest of them, I just had a dog join me here. My question is, are we thinking that they're going to try to get to Belfast, or is there any connection to Main and Company from any of these businesses? Because we've tangled with Main and Company in our project, and so I didn't know if Main and Company was involved with any of this.
I love that question. And especially that's one of the questions that came up in my mind when I saw that, Eric Heim going north to Millinocket and, working with Maine Water potentially on this project. And I noticed that, the proximity to where Maine Water is, might tell a story that they might be making some arrangement, but I haven't pulled, I don't know. Where it's not a public utility, it's harder to get information from them too. So that's another huge problem, is the lack of transparency. When I sat on that water commission, it was set up initially to address taxation on water, but I was, steering in a different direction conversation wise, because why should we set up the state to be addicted to tax dollars in relation to export before we get our legal infrastructure taken care of? Because I think that's opening the door in a dangerous way. But also, one thing that was clear is all the agencies that oversee permitting and protections and regulations of water, they're not really talking to each other. And so nobody could tell us, like, what is the total of gallons that are being used and exported? Nobody had that information at their fingertips. And I know in the case of Hollis, where the world's second largest bottling plant is in Maine, which is 35 miles away from Freiburg, it was a drought year that a few years ago that Poland Spring got a permit from the DEP for an additional like 32 million gallons of water per year during a drought, when local farms had to ship in their water to take care of their daily needs for their farm. And that's a scary prospect.
It's not
And
right.
so-
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, when the community, and I was trying to look for data that would exist on all of this information from all of their wells. And that was another thing that I brought up at the state level and I looked at the town maps and the GIS systems for the Maine Geological Survey, and they don't even put up all of the wells, Poland Springs wells, on our Maine Geological Survey maps and list them and how much each well is permitted for and what their withdrawals are. We should be able to tell. So any planning board in any community in Maine and dealing with this type of thing, we should be able to see who the big water extractors and what they're taking, and have a responsible, I hate the word water budget because it's language of, commodification, but how much are we using? When the New York Times talked to the hydrologist of the Maine Geological Survey, he admitted, like, they have no idea how many wells are in the state of Maine or what's being used. They depend on the people that own the wells not to commit fraud. I mean, it's not that they don't collect some data, but overall, we have no idea how much is being used versus how much is being replenished every year. So, now that we have all of these big businesses coming to Maine, because we have ample water sources, like on land fish farms. We're looking at technology coming in. I mean, if a data cooling center comes in, we have metallic mining now, which takes a tremendous amount of water. We need to get our act together, and we need interagency coordination. And so that was the bulk of what we talked about on that commission, just to steer in a more responsible direction and talk about what can the state make from water exports. You had a
Yeah.
question?
So, yes. So just to add insult to injury, Eric Heim was appointed to a position in the USDA as an expert in aquaculture, and recently, a company joined the Belfast Chamber of Commerce, which purports to be an expert in all things aquaculture. Trying to get, if you want to get involved in aquaculture, you should get in touch with these people because they have all of their expertise, and that clearly is Nace and Heim that are behind that. So it's it's very interesting how far that insurance agent has gone.
Wow.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
failing to set up an experiment of aquaculture, it makes them an expert. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. They learned a lot from their failure in Belfast, I guess.
Yeah.
But so they now tout themselves as having the experience and the expertise to help people that want to become investors in aquaculture. It's
Right.
on the Belfast Chamber of Commerce listing now.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think I want to point out, most people are aware that one of the things that made the city of Belfast vulnerable to Nordic aquaculture to begin with is the fact that our water district was completely unprepared to do changes to the infrastructure of our 100-year-old water system. And in fact, still is unprepared to do any changes, but was going to be propelled into that by Heim coming, Heim and Nordic aquaculture coming to town to do repairs that have been deferred. And as to the PUC, looking after the quasi-municipal organization, all it took was a letter from our then city manager to the PUC to waive an 8-month citizen comment period following the PUC meeting at the start of that process. And it was waived. And this all happened within a month after the meeting, when nobody even understood what this land-based aquaculture was. And the third thing about that was that, in fact, when they did the test wells and couldn't get enough water on that initial piece of property, what it brought up for the water district was that they were going to have to sell more water to Nordic than they had anticipated having to sell. And then they tried to suppress the hydrologist report that actually had a statement in it that said that if there were a conflict of needs between the hospital and schools and certain industries, that they might take precedence over residential water needs. The other thing was that there was talk about opening a third well up in the Goose River area, which is situated, has never been opened because it's situated so close to the Smart Road covered over landfill that there is already intrusion into that well, and it was not determined to be a good well. But if Nordic Aqua Farms were located here, that well would surely be opened in order to ensure that they had adequate water.
Mm-hmm.
So many issues.
Now that sounds like a good bill. Nobody should get a waiver for something like that. That's it's obnoxious, but we see how these systems are set up, and it's, might be working for these large businesses, but it really, we should be taken off guard like that. And slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and we need to know what we're getting into. And honestly, it would fit the businesses in the end to do that in a responsible way, in a way that the local community wanted, not in what they want to impose upon us. So, again, these models based on this hyper capitalism that we're experiencing right now is just out of balance. And so I think it's,
Nickie, is the right to food constitutional movement, the people that worked on that, are they thinking about these water issues related to the right to food?
Well, they've been thinking about them all along, because I was working with them back in 2016. And originally it was the right to food and water.
Yeah,
And you
right.
know, the people focusing on the food part of it was really taken aback when they saw the amount of additional suits in the room during the hearing, and saw what I have to deal with on a regular basis up there, because of the water interest. And so, Poland's, well, Nestle Waters, North America, their a logistics manager got up and said directly, like, this is a threat to our parent company. And
Mm.
soon after, it was very clear. So we had to like figure out, do we want to sink this whole effort? Because it's not going to go anywhere if it includes water. But we all know protecting our right to food is completely in vain unless we can protect our rights to water. So,
Ah,
it's interesting. So, but
yeah,
if we'll see how this plays out, because our right to food, like I said, is in vain without the right to water. So there could be opportunity
right.
in there. So that way, we can go to a sustainable model of being able to feed ourselves. And instead of like growing all of the fish on land to export to the global market, we can bring back the health of our inland like rivers and waterways and our oceans to provide what we need once again, if we can only hold those entities accountable for destroying it. So, but it can happen.
Mm.
It can happen,
Yeah.
I just went to look at the alewives running up not far where I am. So it's possible. We just have to start making right decisions now. And it starts
Right.
with saying goodbye to Nordic. It's saying no more to Poland Spring. Let's go to a smaller scale sustainable model. Let's go. And also, and we're looking at prospects that are related to the destruction of Sears Island. It's all connected. And how do we have a more responsible, scalable, to the local need model?
Yeah. We have time for one more question. Is there one more question for Nickie? Yes, Parker.
Yeah, thank you so much. You mentioned the importance of education and awareness on water rights and all the interconnected issues. Are there any avenues of education that give you hope in particular?
Yeah, definitely. We just finished up editing a little film with Sunlight about salmon project with the Penobscot Nation and releasing all of these salmon back into the Penobscots to encourage the population to come back. This Tuesday and Wednesday, there's hearings in Augusta and Waterville to remove 4 dams on the Kennebec. So that way the inland waterways can be restored and the fish can go where they need to go. And hopefully not just salmon, but the other species that go along with it. Things like that are hopeful because as the more that we're connected to those species and their return and invested in that, then we have to look at the things that are harming them and deal with them accordingly. So we just need to center things that aren't human-centric, like making sure that our tap water is clean. We're finally trying to address the PFAS issue. We have a long way to go, but identifying that plastics and PFAS is really harmful. And hopefully we can get a hold of our waste stream. There's movements happening right now about that. We're fighting big battles, with corporations, but the awareness train is going on that. So I do feel hopeful, but definitely when I see those fish returning, it's about protecting their habitat. And I do feel hopeful about that. And also, even though we failed with 1111 and the amount, like it was literally like Luke and I in the State House versus, I don't know, at least 15 lobbyists trapping the legislators in the hallway and handing out these pages of mischaracterizations of the problem. So they felt afraid to vote for it. There were still 56 legislators that stuck with us, and many of them are determined and they see the problem and they understand. So there's even successes and some failures, and we're going to keep trying. And You know, it's about connecting these problems. So the more that we connect, like the aqua farm problem to the water privatization problem, you know, and to the dam removal issue, it's really important that we keep these conversations happening in a robust way, because there are solutions. So, and it's the next generation. We're just setting them up. So anything I can do for any community to educate, that's what we're here for.
Great. Well, Nickie, thank you so much. And, you know, you and I remember had a big conversation about what a coalition would look like, you know, and all of the players. I mean, it's a huge thing to think about, but your question, Parker, you know, I wish there was like kind of one focal point, but it's so many pieces. But I do think that we are bringing more pieces into the light and more public education. So perhaps, you know, a few years from now, or even sooner than that, there will be a central voice to all of these issues, because they are connected.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much. We're really grateful that you've come to share your knowledge and your experience with us, and we appreciate it so much.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me. I appreciate
Yeah.
you all and everything that you've been doing with, you know, Harriet Hartley. It's amazing. And so again, that's another story, a success story. You know, there's still a mile left to go, but look how far you've come in these years. And again, that's what we need to look to. So I want to thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you for coming on. Okay, good night.
Bye.
Yes. Bye.